Okay, let's quickly go over what's included in the box with the Fiio KA3. This is the package right here, of course. It looks very similar to the package the BTR5 2021 comes in, so pretty cool design. I like the packaging. Then you have a Type-C to Type-C USB cable. Quality's decent. It's not the best cable I've seen, but it works and it actually is of decent quality. Then you have a Type-C to Type-A USB adapter and the DAC itself. So the Fiio KA3 is actually very competitively priced at $89. It is a collaboration with their sister company Jade Audio and is actually Fiio's first entry into the non-battery powered USB DAC market. Of course, they have lots of other battery powered Bluetooth USB DACs, but they've never delved into DACs of this type. As for the build quality, the KA3's body is constructed from powder-coated machined aluminum, and it feels quite sturdy and well built. Definitely gives the impression that it's built to last. So when you're just going about your day, your daily routine, I don't think you really have to worry much about whether or not this can take it. I think you'll be just fine. In regards to the design, the KA3 is it's a very simple device. As you can see, it has a single USB Type-C input and two audio outputs, a single-ended 3.5 and a balanced 4.4 millimeter output. Fiio obviously took a pretty minimalist approach to the design, but it still looks nice and clean. It also has an LED indicator that changes colors depending on the source resolution. If you're listening to 48 kilohertz PCM and below, the indicator is blue. For anything above 48 kilohertz PCM, it's yellow, and for DSD, it's green. As far as power output, this thing will put out 130 milliwatts at 32 ohms from the 3.5 millimeter and 240 milliwatts from the balanced 4.4 output. The chip that this uses, the DAC chip, is a Sabre ES9038Q2M. The frequency range is 20 to 40,000 hertz. The signal to noise ratio is 121 dBs out of the 3.5 and 122 out of the 4.4 balance jack. And as far as the codecs and the bit rate it supports PCM up to 32 bits at 768 kilohertz, and also DSD up to 512, so DSD 512. Okay, now as far as functions and usability, it's quite simple. Basically, it's plug and play. You just plug it into your device. This little light will turn on right here, and you just kind of go from there. So pretty simple in that regard. What is cool also is Fiio gives you their Fiio Control app, which gives you just a little more control, a little more personalization. This is actually something I talked about when I reviewed the BTR5 2021. This one doesn't give you quite as much control. It doesn't have as many options, but it does give you all the options you need. Of course, there are no buttons on the actual KA3 itself, so you control it through the app. So we'll open that up, and it shows here that it's connected to the Fiio KA3. You have the option to turn hardware mute switch on and off, dynamic power policy on and off. You've got your indicator light options, so you can turn this indicator light off and on. You have your impedance low and high option, and also you can choose between high and low gain. If you click audio right here, then it also gives you device volume control, channel balance, and then you can select your filter. Right now it's on the default filter sharp roll off. And then if you click guide, that'll actually take you to, you have to be connected. I'm not connected to the internet right now, but it will take you to the guide. And of course, this doesn't have a built-in battery, so it has to draw power from whatever source you have it plugged into. And now as far as battery drainage from all the devices I had it connected to, I didn't notice any excessive battery drain, so it's quite efficient in that regard. I have also noticed that this thing can get a little bit warm. Not hot, but definitely a little bit warm, even in some of my shorter listening sessions. But even again, with my longer listening sessions, it never really got to the point where it was hot and made me worry. And that is fairly normal. So it's, again, nothing really to worry about. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the sound of the Fiio KA3. As you can see, I've got some of my collection out here. These are the 4 IEMs that I actually spent most of my time with when I was testing the KA3. I've got the Duno SA6, Moondrop Variation, I've got the Theaudio Monarch Mark II, and the Blessing 2 Dusk. I've got the regular version of the Blessing 2 as well, but I tend to like the tuning on this one just a little bit more. But as far as the, we'll go over the sound signature of the KA3 first. Now, and we've all heard all of the buzzwords that reviewers typically use when they're referring to a sound signature. You've got on the mid-bass, kind of bassier side, you've got what can be referred to again as warm. Also, you've heard the term like organic or musical. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got something that might be a little more upper mid or treble focused, maybe with not as much mid bass or bass. That can be referred to as more clinical or analytical. Then you have something that might fall right in the middle, which would be just neutral. Typically, now as far as my preference, I like neutral to warm. I don't necessarily like an overly analytical sound or an overly detailed clinical presentation. I do like it to be at least neutral, but probably more leaning towards a warm sound signature, a little more lower mid, maybe mid bass, slightly mid bass focused. But of course, I still want it to have the detail and resolution as well. And of course, being a drummer, I do want to hear the treble. I want to hear all that detail and crispiness that a hi-hat might have in the attack on a snare. So for me, I like the balance of both, but again, kind of more leaning towards the warm side, because I want my instruments to sound more natural. I want that to have more of an organic sound. For example, like the Burr Brown DAC chip, and that's actually one of my favorite chips. That chip is a really good DAC chip, and that one is known for having kind of a warm, more organic sound signature. So where does the KA3 fall on that spectrum? Well, to my ears, it's neutral. So it's not warm, it's not overly clinical, it falls kind of right in the middle. So if I were to describe it as far as across the whole frequency spectrum, I would say it's pretty linear, and I don't hear any coloration at all. So again, pretty linear across the frequency spectrum. Now, as far as breaking down kind of the treble mids and the bass, so the treble is good. It's going to give you that air. You're going to hear all the crispy details in a hi-hat, the attack on snares, toms, and as you work your way further down, like to the lower treble, again, it's pretty linear. Female vocals aren't any more forward than male vocals. Mids sound, again, pretty linear, not too far forward, not too recessed. There's a good amount of detail retrieval in the mids. And again, that carries all through the lower mids, mid bass, bass and sub bass as well. There's
Probably as far as texture and layering in the lower mids and mid bass, it's probably about average. It could be better, but for $89, I would say it's adequate and it's still good. So you have a very, again, linear presentation, a good amount of detail. And I think now would also be a good time to just talk about the DAC chip that they're using in the KA3. This has, again, the ES9038Q2M, and that's not just your average DAC chip. It's definitely not something you would expect to find in a little $89 DAC, because this chip is actually typically used in much more expensive devices. So props to Fiio for that, for sure. Now, okay, let's talk about the noise floor. For those of you who are familiar with my reviews, you know that's something I always talk about. And I used to use my OG Campfire Solaris to test that. Now I've got the 2020 Andromeda. This thing is super sensitive, so if there is any noise to be heard, this will definitely reveal it. But one thing I don't ever really talk about is what the importance of that is and why that's important. And a lot of you, again, probably most of my viewers probably already know what that means, but there might be those that are newer to the hobby who aren't familiar with the term noise floor and why it's important to have a low noise floor. So I just quickly want to talk about that, maybe just to give some of you a little more understanding as to why that's something I cover and why it's important. So basically, noise is always going to be present with any DAC amp. It never really ever goes away completely, but with good engineering and high quality components, it can pretty much be minimized to the point to where it's virtually undetectable. So why is that important to have a low noise floor or a high signal to noise ratio? Firstly, that background hiss can be kind of annoying, and you know that there are sometimes during quieter parts of the song where you might hear a little bit of hiss in the background, or if you're listening to maybe a song that's acoustic that just has maybe a vocal and an acoustic guitar, and you're going to hear that hiss in the background. For me personally, that can actually take away from the listening experience. If a good DAC has what's referred to as a black background, that means there's no hiss. I can immerse myself more into the music, and it just results in an overall a better listening experience. And one other thing is, depending on what the level of that noise floor is, if the noise floor is a little too high, not only is it distracting, it can actually take away or mask some of those quieter details in the song. So again, it helps you to hear maybe some of those finer, quieter details and nuances that you may not hear if you've got too much of a noise floor. Again, just kind of enabling the listener to immerse themselves a little further into the music without the distraction of that hiss. And of course, there are also other things that you have to take into consideration. You have to consider your source, the power output of your device, the frequency range. So there's a lot of things that can kind of come into play when you're talking about noise and the noise floor. Okay, so how is the noise floor of the KA3? Well, it's quiet, absolutely quiet. And again, I used that term black earlier. I would say this is a black background. And again, using the Andromeda 2020, if there was any noise to be heard, this would definitely pick it up. So this allows you, again, this little device allows you to really immerse yourself in those quieter parts of music, or those quieter songs. There's no distraction, no hiss, which again, going back to the DAC that they used, that's a DAC that's used in some higher end devices. So again, props to Fiio for using that. This is a very, very quiet device. Okay, so now let's talk about the power output and performance of the KA3. So as you can see, I only own IEMs. I used to own some over-the-ear headphones a long time ago, but I don't have any now for testing. So all of my testing obviously is done with IEMs. So what kind of power output are we talking about here? The KA3 outputs 130 milliwatts from the 3.5 and 240 milliwatts from the 4.4. So both outputs have enough power to drive all of my IEMs. So if you only own IEMs, this will give you plenty of power to power from both of these outputs. But if you do own maybe some harder to drive over-ear headphones, you may need to stick with just the 4.4 output. From what I've read about this, the 130 milliwatts from the 3.5, it can probably drive some of the over-ear headphones, but you're going to get obviously better performance driving, sending most over-ear headphones more power. So the 4.4 should work with most over-ears, but definitely enough power to power every IEM that I own. And actually most of my actual testing, I did test both. Of course, I tested the 3.5 and the 4.4, but most of my actual listening when I was just doing casual listening was done with the 4.4 output. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of summarize everything that you get with the KA3 for $89. Again, you've got good build quality. You've got the machined hard aluminum housing. So it has a nice, sturdy, durable feel to it. You've got the 3.5 output. You've got the 4.4 balanced output. You've got the higher end DAC chip, low noise floor, plenty of power to power pretty much any IEM you might have. And you also have the Fiio control app that gives you the ability to personalize and control your KA3. So that's pretty awesome. Again, for Fiio's first entry into the non-battery powered DAC market, this is a solid first entry. This thing is really just a great little device. Again, for 89 bucks, I think this is a super solid entry for Fiio. So yeah, this is definitely something I can easily recommend. So I would just want to say thank you to all of my viewers. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you like the video. I hope you subscribe and share. Thank you guys. I hope you have an awesome day.